In November of 2025, a small team of engineers set up equipment on the eastern face of a 4,500-year-old pyramid in Giza, aiming radar antennas and ultrasonic sensors at a patch of granite that, to almost anyone else, would look completely unremarkable. They weren't digging. They weren't drilling. Egyptian law doesn't allow that anymore, not on structures this old and this fragile. What they were doing was quieter, and in some ways stranger, sending invisible signals through solid rock, trying to see the shape of empty space hidden inside a monument that people have been staring at, studying, and cataloging for over a century. And what those signals sent back was something nobody expected to still be possible to find here. Two pockets of nothing. Two gaps in the stone, sitting exactly where an old, half-forgotten theory said they might be. This isn't a story about ancient curses or lost golden treasure. It's stranger than that, because it's a live mystery, happening right now on a building most people assumed had already given up every secret it had. So let's talk about the smallest of the three great pyramids of Giza, the one that almost nobody picks as their favorite, and why, in the last year, it quietly became one of the most interesting unsolved puzzles in Egyptology. The pyramid belongs to a pharaoh named Menkaure, who ruled during Egypt's 4th dynasty, somewhere around 2500 BC. Compared to its two enormous neighbors, the pyramids of Khufu and Khafra, Menkaure's pyramid is modest, standing at roughly 65 meters tall, a little more than a third of the height of the Great Pyramid beside it. But smaller doesn't mean simpler, and it definitely doesn't mean less mysterious. In fact, this particular pyramid has a history of refusing to give up its secrets cleanly, starting long before modern archaeology ever got involved. In the year 1196, nearly 3,500 years after Menkaure was buried, a son of the famous Sultan Saladin attempted to tear the pyramid apart completely, convinced that stripping away its stones would reveal hidden riches inside. He failed, but not without leaving a permanent scar, a jagged gouge on the pyramid's north face that's still visible today, sitting right above the entrance modern tourists now use to walk inside. Centuries later, in 1837, a British army officer and adventurer named Richard William Howard Vyse arrived at Giza with a very different tool for getting answers: gunpowder. Vyse had grown obsessed with the pyramids, and his method for exploring them, sometimes literally called dynamite archaeology by later historians, involved blasting his way through solid stone to reach hidden chambers. After detonating charges deep inside Menkaure's pyramid, Vyse broke through into what he believed was the pharaoh's original burial chamber. Inside, sitting in the dust and rubble, was a massive stone sarcophagus carved from basalt, roughly 8 feet long, undecorated, with no hieroglyphs anywhere on its surface. In a separate chamber nearby, Vyse also found something that seemed, at first glance, to confirm everything. A wooden coffin, inscribed with Menkaure's own name, containing human bones wrapped in coarse fabric. It looked, for a moment, like the mystery was solved. The pharaoh had been found. Except it wasn't that simple. And this is where the story takes its first real turn. When researchers eventually tested those bones using radiocarbon dating, decades later, the results didn't match Menkaure's era at all. The remains were from thousands of years after his death, likely placed inside that inscribed coffin during a much later period of Egyptian history, possibly as part of restoration efforts, or possibly as an outright substitution. Menkaure's actual body, whatever remained of it after 4,500 years, has never been definitively identified. And then, almost as if the story wanted one more twist, the physical evidence that could have settled at least part of the mystery was lost entirely, and not through fire or theft, but through sheer bad luck. Vyse had the basalt sarcophagus loaded onto a British merchant ship called the Beatrice, bound for London and the British Museum. In 1838, somewhere off the coast of Malta, the Beatrice sank. The sarcophagus went down with it, and to this day, it has never been recovered. One of the only intact royal sarcophagi from Egypt's Old Kingdom is sitting somewhere at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, and nobody knows exactly where. So by the 20th century, here's where things stood. A pharaoh whose real burial location was uncertain. A sarcophagus lost at sea. A wooden coffin that turned out to be a much later substitution. And a pyramid that had already been blasted open, explored, cataloged, and, in the minds of most people, fully understood. Except one detail kept nagging at researchers, and it had nothing to do with buried treasure. It had to do with a section of wall. On the eastern face of Menkaure's pyramid, there's a patch of granite blocks, roughly 4 meters tall and 6 meters wide, polished to an unusually smooth finish. That might sound like a minor architectural detail, the kind of thing only a specialist would notice, except for one thing. That exact same style of polished finish appears in only one other place on the entire structure, right around the pyramid's actual, known entrance, on the northern face. In 2019, independent researcher named Stijn van den Hoven noticed this pattern and proposed something that most Egyptologists treated as an interesting but unproven idea. What if that polished section on the east face wasn't decorative at all? What if it was marking the location of a second entrance, one that had never been found, blocked, or hidden behind the pyramid's outer casing for over 4,000 years? For years, that idea sat there, plausible, but unconfirmed because there was no way to test it without potentially damaging one of the most protected monuments on Earth. That changed in 2025. A research team from Cairo University and the Technical University of Munich, working as part of an ongoing initiative called the Scan Pyramids Project, decided to test van den Hoven's theory using entirely non-invasive methods. No drilling, no blasting, just 3 separate scanning technologies layered on top of each other, aimed directly at that suspicious patch of polished stone. The first method was electrical resistivity tomography, which works by sending a weak electrical current through solid rock and measuring how different materials resist that current differently. Dense stone behaves one way. Empty space behaves in a completely different, distinctive way. The second method was ground-penetrating radar, using radio waves that bounce differently off solid material compared to air. And the third was ultrasonic testing using sound waves to map the internal structure of the stonework, the same basic principle used in medical ultrasound, just aimed at 4,500-year-old granite instead of a human body. Individually, each of these methods can be ambiguous. Granite is a difficult, dense material, and joints between blocks, weathered stone, or ancient repair work can sometimes look confusingly similar to a genuine hidden void. So the team didn't rely on any single method alone. Instead, they used a technique called image fusion, essentially overlaying the results from all 3 scanning methods on top of each other, looking for a location where every single method agreed that something unusual was there. And in this case, all 3 did agree. Behind that patch of unusually polished granite, at a depth of roughly 1.4 meters and 1.13 meters beneath the surface, the team identified 2 distinct, separate air-filled voids. The first measures about 1 meter high and 1.5 meters wide. The second is slightly smaller, roughly 90 centimeters by 70 centimeters. 2 genuine gaps, confirmed by 3 independent scientific methods, sitting exactly where a theory from 2019 predicted something might be hiding. Now, here's the part where it would be easy to get carried away, and it's worth slowing down and being honest about what this actually means and what it doesn't. The researchers themselves have been careful not to call this a hidden treasure chamber or a lost tomb or anything nearly that dramatic. What they've found is evidence of structural anomalies, air pockets that shouldn't be there if the pyramid's interior were simply solid stone all the way through. That's genuinely significant. It's the first physical evidence supporting the idea that Menkaure's pyramid may have a second unexplored entrance point. But the technology used so far can't tell researchers how deep these voids extend, whether they connect to any larger passage or chamber, or what, if anything, might be inside them. The team has openly said they can't yet determine the full extent of what they've found, and they've proposed further investigation using methods like cosmic ray muography, a technique that uses naturally occurring particles from space to see even deeper into solid structures without any physical contact at all, or small robotic endoscopic cameras, if a large enough gap is eventually confirmed. This isn't the first time a discovery like this has happened at Giza in recent years, and that history is worth knowing because it tells you how these mysteries tend to unfold. Back in 2017, an international team using cosmic ray muon detectors discovered an enormous previously unknown void deep inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu, right next door to Menkaure's, a space so large it became known simply as the Big Void. Years of follow-up investigation still haven't fully determined its exact purpose. Then, in 2023, the same Scan Pyramids project confirmed the existence of a hidden corridor near Khufu's original entrance, a 9-meter passage that had sat completely undetected for over 4,500 years, again found only through careful, non-invasive scanning rather than digging. Neither of those earlier discoveries turned out to be secret treasure rooms. What they revealed instead were genuine architectural mysteries, spaces that seemed to have served some structural or ceremonial purpose that researchers are still working to fully understand. The voids at Menkaure may turn out to be something similar, an unexplained architectural feature, evidence of a sealed and forgotten entrance, or possibly something related to how the pyramid's casing stones were originally installed and later modified. And it's worth remembering that Menkaure's pyramid has a genuinely unusual construction history to begin with. Unlike its neighbors, its lower courses were left deliberately rough and unfinished before being clad in expensive pink. Granite hauled from quarries at Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. Some Egyptologists believe that Menkaure died before construction was fully complete, and that his successor, a pharaoh named Shepseskaf, oversaw the pyramid's final stages, including, possibly, the granite corridor leading to its main burial chamber. If the pyramid's interior arrangement was altered or added to after Menkaure's death, that raises a genuinely open question. Could this newly detected void be connected to that unfinished, modified construction phase? Could it be an intentional, later addition, sealed, for reasons we don't yet understand? Right now, honestly, nobody knows. And that's actually the most interesting part of this entire story. So here's where this leaves us. More than 4,500 years after Menkaure was first laid to rest inside this pyramid, assuming his remains ever made it inside the burial chamber that survives today, and not somewhere else entirely, lost to us the same way his sarcophagus was lost to the sea. His pyramid has already been blasted open with gunpowder, explored, catalogued, and considered thoroughly understood for well over a century. And yet, using nothing more destructive than radio waves, electrical currents, and sound in a survey that didn't remove a single stone, researchers found two spaces that simply shouldn't be there, confirming a theory nobody could prove just a few years earlier. There's something worth sitting with in that. The most damage ever done to this pyramid came from a man trying to force his way inside with explosives, hoping to find something valuable. And the most meaningful discovery in decades came from a team that never touched the stone at all, just listened carefully to what was already hiding inside it. The investigation isn't finished. Nobody has looked inside those voids yet. Nobody knows if they lead anywhere, or connect to anything, or whether they'll turn out to be a genuine forgotten entrance, an unremarkable construction gap, or something else entirely that hasn't even been proposed yet. For now, the only honest answer is the same one archaeologists have been giving about this pyramid, in one form or another, for nearly 2 centuries. There's clearly something there. We just don't know what it is yet. And somewhere at the bottom of the Mediterranean, still resting inside the wreck of a ship that sank almost 200 years ago, the one object that might have answered some of these questions with total certainty is still waiting, in the dark, for someone to finally find it.